Both to be due impartial justice. This is wrong. It's a travesty, and we must try to change it in those early votes.
Senator Merkley, thank you. We're going to listen live to these remarks.
Trial. And we could see why this resolution was kept from us and from the American people. This is nothing like the process that was used in the Clinton trial. To begin with, and this is, I think, most indicative, in the Clinton trial, both Senate leadership worked out a bipartisan proposal for how the trial would be conducted. That obviously has not happened here. Senator McConnell did not consult at all with Senator Schumer on the contents of this text. I would imagine that Senator Schumer only got to see it probably around the same time that we did in the House. And the reason this was kept hidden is that it does not prescribe a process for a fair trial. And the American people desperately want to believe that the Senate will give both the president and the House of Representatives a fair trial. This resembles nothing like the Clinton proceeding. For the first point, in the Clinton case, if we're truly following the Clinton precedent, all of the documents were provided before the trial, more than 90,000 of them. Does this resolution provide for the president to provide the documents before the trial? No, it does not. It leaves that question of whether the House will ever see these documents, whether the American people will ever see these documents, to the end and only the end, with no guarantee that this material will ever be shown to the House or to the American people. That is a profound departure from the Clinton trial. Without the documents, you can't make important judgments about even which witnesses should be called.
Exactly.
Or what questions should be asked of the witnesses when you do. So that is a profound departure from the Clinton precedent. On the subject of witnesses, it is also a deep departure from Clinton, where all of the witnesses testified before the Senate trial. The issue in the Clinton trial was not whether they would testify. They had testified already. They had been interviewed already, some dozens of times. The question in the Clinton trial was, will they be recalled? Will they be required to testify again? And that question was answered in the affirmative. Here, though, if we're following the Clinton precedent, all of these witnesses should testify, should be deposed before the trial begins, not after the trial is over.
Right.
So this is not at all the model used in the Clinton case as well. This resolution even goes so far in another departure from the Clinton precedent to say they're not even going to admit the evidence that was received in the House, that they're going to even postpone the decision about whether any of the witness testimony will actually be part of the record. And finally, they are compressing the time of the trial. Whereas the Clinton trial, managers had 6 hours a day to present over a course of days. They're now presenting that we double the amount of time each day so that the proceedings can conceivably go well into the night when apparently Senator McConnell hopes the American people will not be watching. This is not a process for a fair trial. This is the process for a rigged trial.
A sham.
This is the process if you do not want the American people to see the evidence.
Right.
This is a process you use if you want to, hand in hand, working in concert with the president, allow the president to continue to obstruct the Congress and deny the truth to the American people.
In other words, pull the wool over the American people's eyes.
Thankfully, however, we know the truth. The evidence is already overwhelming, and that evidence is that the president abused the power of his office, withheld hundreds of millions of dollars of needed military aid to an ally at war in order to coerce that ally into interfering in our election. And then when he was caught, obstructed the Congress to cover it up. That truth is inescapable, no matter how McConnell wishes to structure this trial. But we will be appealing to the manager, we will be appealing as managers to the senators today to live up to the oath they have just taken, to do impartial justice and to hold a fair trial. And we're happy to respond to questions.
Let me add something here. I just want to add that this fixation on the Clinton precedent is weird.
Odd.
The Clinton trial was conducted fairly, but distorting what happened there shouldn't make a difference. The question is, should you have a fair trial now? Any intelligent person knows that in any trial, whether it's for robbing a bank or for subverting the Constitution of the United States, the accusers, in this case the House of Representatives, bring in all the witnesses and all the evidence. The defenders can bring in all the evidence they want. That's how you have a trial. To be debating whether you should have the evidence admitted, to be debating whether you should allow witnesses, is to be debating whether you should have a cover-up by definition. There's no other way to look at it. It doesn't matter how it was done some time ago. It was done very fairly as it happened some time ago. But it doesn't matter. It cannot be used as an excuse. The only reason to oppose bringing a witness is to cover up because you're afraid of what the witness will say. The question before the Senate is, do the Republican senators want to be complicit in the cover-up of the president? Any senator who votes to deny a witness, who votes to deny evidence, is voting to cover up the president's crimes and subversion of the Constitution. There's no other way about it. There is no conceivable reason to deny witnesses, to say you cannot bring in the evidence. The House of Representatives cannot bring in the evidence. There's no reason. I mean, it's obvious to say, what do they fear? Why won't they bring in the witnesses? Because they are afraid of what the witnesses will say. But there's no trial in this country,
None.
in which you wouldn't admit the relevant witnesses.
That's exactly what they done to the Lord Jesus Christ during his trial with Pontius Pilate and King Herod. It was nothing but a sham from the get-go towards them accusing Jesus of the crimes that they was accusing Jesus of. If anything, Pontius Pilate and King Herod should have been glorifying Jesus. They should have been patting him on the back and telling him what kind of good job that he had done pertaining to bringing enlightenment and transparency into people's eyes pertaining to who and what sin actually was. How that he healed the sick, brought sight to the blind, how that he raised the dead, turned water into wine, and done other great miracles. If anything, Pontius Pilate and King Herod should have been glorifying Jesus. But instead, it was a one-sided sham. And because it was a one-sided sham, instead of Pontius Pilate doing the right thing, or King Herod, they washed their hands of that particular trial, and they went ahead and executed an innocent man. They killed an individual that they never should have killed. They showed more mercy and compassion to a known thief or a robber by the name of Barabbas than they did the very one that was offering them eternal life beyond this life. It is amazing that people today still want to conduct themselves in the dark, evil, demonic, devious persuasions of injustice today like they did 2,000 years ago in the trial of Jesus Christ. It's mind-blowing to me to think that people literally think that they can still pull the wool over people's eyes in today's society the same way that they done over 2,000 years ago. Because if the truth be known, the very ones that was committing blasphemy that day was not Jesus Christ, but it was the rabbis, it was the holy men, it was the priest, it was Jesus' own people that was falsely accusing him of committing blasphemy. that day. It was not Jesus Christ, the one that they crucified that day. It just tells you how influential that the dark powers was not only then, but how influential that the dark powers are even of the 21st century of today.
Which is even a question.
Let's go to questions.
Do you even need the full 24 hours to make your case? And are you going to use the full 24 hours even to go through the night?
This is
That will be a decision that the House should make, not that the Senate should prescribe to go late into the evening. Look, there is a wealth of evidence to present here, and we should have the opportunity to present the case as the House chooses to present its case, not to go late into the evening when Senator McConnell evidently hopes the public may not be watching. And so we'll make decisions about how long our case should go within the rules that are prescribed.
being deceitful, wanting to do things underhandedly, wanting to pull the wool over people's eyes towards them not discovering the truth about what actually has occurred here. That's the reason why they're wanting to do it in inappropriate times. That way the majority of the people will be as sound asleep. Keep in mind, the majority of the people has busy lives. Everybody don't stay awake from 6 in the morning till 10 or 11 at night. Some people have second shifts. Some people have third shifts. The world no longer functions the way that it used to 100 years ago. Today, we have companies, we have towns, we have cities that stay fully functionable 24/7, that don't never shut down. A matter of fact, I don't think Walmart ever shuts down, ever, except one day, and that's the day of Christmas. There's a 24-hour period that Walmart will shut its doors from Christmas Eve to the fulfillment of Christmas Day. Then after that, they're back up and running again 24/7. 7/24. They're up and going 356 days out of the year. We're no longer functioning the way that we used to function back 100 years ago. So this is some sort of a diversion, being deceitful to the American people towards not allowing for the courts to be heard and seen during the appropriate time that it needs to be heard and seen.
But I think the question is, what is the senator's interest? What is Senator McConnell's interest in structuring the trial this way? Is this about hiding the evidence from the American people with late night sessions? Is this about just trying to get it over with? Because that should not be the motivation here. Senator McConnell has taken the same oath as every other senator in that chamber, and that is to do impartial justice, not to try to skew the process in such a way where the House is not permitted to put its evidence before the American people.
Do you worry that all this focus on rules and process and what Senator McConnell is doing dilutes in any way the message you're trying to put out about what you think President Trump did?
No, because look, this is part and parcel of an effort to cover up the president's misconduct. That was the whole object that is charged in Article 2 of the impeachment articles. And if the Senate and the Senate leadership will not allow the House to present its case, will not allow the calling of witnesses or presentation of documents, if Senator McConnell makes this the first impeachment trial in history without witnesses or documents, it will not prove the president innocent. It will merely prove the Senate guilty of working with the president to obstruct,
cover it up,
the truth from coming out. And so I do think that by structuring the trial this way, it furthers our case that what's going on here really is a cover-up of evidence to the American people.
What would you like to hear from the most?
Well, and I'll ask for some of my colleagues to add on as well. But look, there are a number of key witnesses, I think, that we know even at the outside of the trial should be called. And there are people like John Bolton and people like Mick Mulvaney. There are people like Michael Duffy and Mr. Blair and others. But if we're proceeding in a logical fashion, if we're truly interested in a fair trial, the first step ought to be the production of the documents. Those documents will reveal precisely who the most important witnesses are.
Exactly.
And they may be those four, and it may be others as well.
Exactly.
Let me just give one illustration of what's being hidden from the American people. We have text messages where high-level people in the diplomatic corps are asking each other, are we really withholding military aid? And as we talked about last night, I think it's crazy to withhold military aid to pressure an ally to get help with a political campaign.
Exactly.
Those documents have not been provided by the administration. They don't want the American people to see them. Now, we have seen them because cooperating witnesses did provide them. But documents like those are being withheld from the public. That is the kind of cover-up that the president is engaged in, and the Senate should not make itself a party to that. So, just to conclude in terms of witnesses, we should review the documents. The House should have the right to call witnesses. The president should have the right to call witnesses, material witnesses, not witnesses just for the purpose of smearing his opponent, but material witnesses.
Exactly.
That's what makes a fair trial. But let me ask my colleagues who haven't had a chance to speak if they'd like to add. Okay. Last question.
How much does it hamstring you to not be able to have to know which witnesses and documents are going to be admitted while you're making your case?
Well, it's as if you're on jury duty, and the judge were to come in the courtroom and say, I've been talking to the defendant, and we've decided I'm not going to let the prosecution call any witnesses, and I'm not going to let them call for any documents. I'm only going to let the prosecution read from the cold record in the grand jury. And even then, we won't necessarily decide. You can consider that as evidence. That makes it impossible to have a fair trial. Not just difficult, but impossible to have a fair trial. And I think for senators who take their oath seriously, and I hope and pray that they do, this is not the fair trial that the American people want. It's not the fair trial the American people deserve. Thank you.
We have been listening to the House Manager's first public presentation here, there in the Capitol before this first day of this trial begins, led primarily by Adam Schiff with some supporting comments from Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee. We have our full panel here in headquarters, Chuck Rosenberg, Eugene Robinson, Maya Wiley, and we're joined by Chris Matthews, the host of Hardball here on MSNBC. Chris, if you are talking about process on day one of an effort to remove the sitting president, are you off balance?
I think so, and I have a cold right now, but I thought you really were there for the opening shot from the defense, from the president's team. Alan Dershowitz does not represent the Republican Party. He represents academia, maybe the best known lawyer in the country. He represents Harvard, the East Coast establishment. He is not like those frat boys that were going defending the president during the House hearings. He's not like Mark Meadows and those guys and Gates. He's not one of them. He doesn't look like one of them. He's academia. He's Northeastern. He's Harvard. He's the guy that got Klaus von Bülow off. He's reversal of fortune. He was in the OJ Dream Team. When he came in and said there's no crime, therefore no impeachable offense, that changed the nature of the whole game here. It's not about process. The story all weekend, the transition game was won by the defense because the whole topic became, can you impeach a president who hasn't committed a crime? And to the right wing, or to the Trumpites, that's a good talking point. To the non-attentive voter, I think Trump always loves the low information guy, the Dancing with the Stars, who cares more about Harry and Meghan or about Brad and Jennifer, and there are a lot more people, by the way, watch the other channels, they care about those topics. It works. No crime, no harm. And I think that by the Dershowitz, he did on you, he had that little Skype operation he was doing in his bedroom somewhere, And then all over the weekend, everybody put him on. And then the White House makes that their defense. No crime, no impeachable offense, and they won the transition game, as we say in basketball. They won the transition game. Well, and now these guys, and by the way, everything that Adam Schiff says there is right. Everything is defensible. It's a good courtroom argument to a very attentive jury.
Well,
but he's not going to get a very attentive jury because he's going to get a partisan jury. So I think the issue of crime and no crime has dominated the headlines over the weekend in the major papers because Dershowitz came on your program, and then everybody else wanted him. Now, whether this was a strategic platooning where they got these sort of mostly Southern frat boy type Republicans off the television for a while to put him on. I know they're bringing him back. But there's a good platooning going on here. Over the weekend, the whole story was no crime, and therefore the guy should be let off. And every argument made here doesn't work.
This is where legal traditions, because that's all it is. It's traditions meets something you know all about, which is political hardball.
And theater.
And theater. And Dershowitz was added to the team along with other TV lawyers by Donald Trump himself.
Right.
If he wanted Giuliani, there were too many people around Trump who wouldn't allow it.
No.
But you look at this team here, the additions are TV. It's Dershowitz, it's Ken Starr, and it's Bondi, who of course is known out of Florida politics, Robert Ray, who took over for Starr. This is who we're going to hear from this week, Chris.
And to make your
let me
point.
finish my question, and then I'll go to you.
Sure.
My question to you is, what Dershowitz argued was something that we fact-checked, that was extreme, that his own prior comments contradict. Your argument is, for a lot of voters who are tuning in and out of this, it won't matter because why?
Because they're fresh to the case, and they're coming into it, and it sounds right. It makes sense. If the guy didn't commit a crime, get off his back. This is just politics. And by the way, bringing in Ken Starr was brilliant. You want to make it into a real circus. You want to say to the average person out there who isn't that political, this is just politics. They went after Clinton. They didn't really have a case except for Monica. They didn't have a case. That's a circus. You say Ken Starr, you're saying a couple things. You're basically saying this is a political game. We had one before, we're having one now. I think it was a great equivalence game. I'm not sure they're as smart as this turns out to be, but I think they've introduced this case today with a pretty good argument and a circus, which Trump loves. Throw the cards in the air, keep it confusing.
Let me take the circus to Gene Robinson, because Chris is saying something that many people...
I personally think it's all a diversion. It's a diversion towards the American politics doing what the American politics should be doing for the American people. We as a society did not put them in office so they could get up there and show themselves as being some sort of, I don't know, freelance or Hollywood actors to the point of a reality show. That way we can be instilled towards what they're saying and looking like on live national TV. We put them in power so they could take care of the problems. The problems with so many people that's unemployed, the problems with our veterans, the problems with our senior citizens, the problems with our health care, the problems with our infrastructure as far as our roads and our bridges tearing apart, the problems with international problems pertaining to Iran and Iraq and North Korea and the NAFTA trade, the problems with the immigrants coming over the Rio Grande and other immigrants that's coming over here through other illegal means. It's not just the Rio Grande, it's everywhere. I mean, you can go down to Homestead, Florida, down towards Miami, and you can find all kinds of illegal immigrants down there that they don't never talk about pertaining to the Cubans. We've got so many problems that it's not even funny from A to Z. But we're all of a sudden asphyxiated upon this one problem. We have dozens of problems here in America that our state senators and our hired officials should be addressing. But instead, we're focused upon this circus. Okay? So to me, this is all some sort of a diversion in part towards where the American politics should be right now on other issues other than the issue of Donald Trump trying to scam the Ukrainians out of money that Congress had already passed to them, which was $390 million of aid, military aid that rightfully should have went to them, because it was Donald Trump that decided to break the law of ethics, of holding back this aid to try to gain leverage over his opponent, which was Biden, the Biden family. That's where it is all leading to. Now, if President Trump has another reason why that he withheld this aid, then he needs to get on TV and he needs to explain it very, very thoroughly to the American people that this is the reason why I done this to an ally. An ally. An ally that was engaged in war. An ally that needed this aid. That this was the reason why that I done this. I really don't think that he's got a leg to stand on, and that's the reason why that they're trying to suppress all of this and put it into the eyes of the American people at unappropriate times so that the vast majority of them won't care. They won't be listening. They won't be watching. Once more, trying to be devious, trying to be deceitful, trying to pull the wool over the American people's eyes. This is what has put the American people at the precipice of being $23 trillion in debt and over 2.3 million incarcerated prisoners and inmates in our jail systems right now. Is the cleverness of politicians that think that they can continue to act in a unjust, unethical, immoral, unmoral way in the eyes of their own constitution, their own laws.
May dislike, may sound like something that is disappointing, and yet he speaks to something really important, which is we all remember the medium is the message.
Yes.
Well, in some cases, especially in politics, your surrogate, your lawyer, they can become the message. Speak to Chris's concern or observation that the Dershowitz Star messaging may take this off course in a way Trump wants.
Well, look, it certainly it made this issue front and center for the weekend. I think for it to be a success, for me to think it's really a success, I think that has to be sustained. Maybe they can sustain it. And I guess my only real question is who's not political about Donald Trump? I mean, who's the average voter who's not political about Donald Trump?
I'm not going to encourage people to turn the channel right now. But I was just watching Jen and Hoda Kotb talking, having a whipped cream contest, throwing it in the air and catching it in their mouth. And Hoda caught the whipped cream in her mouth. And I thought that probably had a bigger audience than we have right now.
Well,
I'm not knocking anybody for those choices, but watch the prime time. We're going into prime time with this fight.
Exactly.
Who's going to be watching this in prime time? I bet it'll be tough tussle.
I don't know who's going to be watching it, but I do know who's going to be paying for it. The tax-paying people. The people that pay the taxes. The working class people will be the people that will be paying for this charade on live national TV. In the meantime, you got other people all over the planet. Europe, China, Japan. I was going to say Australia, but they're too busy right now putting out one of the worst catastrophes that's ever hit their country pertaining to the fires. Canada, Mexico, South America, other places of the world that will be engaged in watching this three-ring circus waiting just at any given moment. Where is the bearded lady and the two-headed calf? Where is the bearded lady and the two-headed calf? In other words, it's turned into a fiasco, a charade, a circus, a freak show. That's what other countries, that's what other dictators, that's what other free world societies are going to be thinking and watching as they see this unfolding about the American people. It is one of the most saddest, horriblest, shameful, absolutely disgraceful events that I have ever in my entire life seen. Whenever Nixon done what Nixon done, they cut right through the chase. And they got to the problem. Well, it didn't take long till they run that rabbit out of that hole. The deal with the Clintons was another sham pertaining to getting up and lying to the American people. But because it was considered a mediocre type promise that was broken to the American people towards lying to the American people, the Senate basically looked over it and he remained in power. How they done that to this day is still bewildering to me. Because if I would have done something like that, if a preacher or a minister, a Sunday school teacher, probationer, anybody associated with the church community would have gotten caught in the degree that Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky was caught, there wouldn't have been no need for a trial. There wouldn't have been no need for a hearing. There wouldn't have been no need for any type of proceedings. It would have been handled quick and swift, appropriate, just like the deal that occurred with Jimmy Swaggart and the Assembly of God Association. It's like, we've caught you. You're busted. These are our rules. Because you violated them, you're off the air for a year. Go get marriage counseling. Seek help in the areas that you need to seek help in, even though your ministry was drawing in $1 million a day. A day out of Jimmy Swaggart, because the establishment was now in violation towards looking like a sham. The Assembly of God Association come down on Jimmy Swaggart and said, this is how the cow's going to eat the cabbage. We want you off the airwaves and no longer associated with the Assembly of God Association. Because people working with Jimmy Swaggart and working with his upper tier was smart enough to figure out, well, we'll just break ranks from the Assembly of God and we'll just go independent. We'll just go solo. And that's what they done. To remain on the air, to remain a predominant force in the eyes of the general public. Now, was that right or wrong pertaining to Jimmy Swaggart? I don't know. Jimmy Swaggart's got to answer for that. That's between Jimmy Swaggart and the Jimmy Swaggart ministry and God. That is no longer pertaining to the Assembly of God Association and Jimmy Swaggart, because the Assembly of God Association made up their mind real quick. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle this. And that's the end of this. And that's what they done. They brought him up in open shame. Whenever you're dealing with politics, politics don't work the same way as the church community does. Sadly, you would think that it would. But over here in America, they have learned to treat politics almost like it's some sort of a Hollywood script, like it's some sort of a reality show. And the sad thing about it is, it's not delusional or delirious whenever you get to looking at the figures towards how much money that we're in debt, $23+ trillion, whenever you get to looking at the problems with our infrastructure pertaining to our bridges, our roads, pertaining to our Medicare, pertaining to our senior citizens, pertaining to our veterans, pertaining to the illegal immigrants, pertaining to the NAFTA trade deal. These are not delusional. These are not some sort of a fictitious Hollywood script. These are actual facts that the American people need to be addressing right now in all these areas towards bettering our lives. But instead, we're fixated up onto a diversion. So you tell me, as an audience, do you think that this is way, way out of hand? I do. I thought the deal that happened with Bill Clinton was out of hand. But they went ahead and kept rolling. They kept the wheels a-going. Of course, we see what later happened throughout the rest of that period that put us where we are today. Whenever you get to pointing fingers at a blame game, this is what a democracy turns into. And instead of it being a democracy, it basically turns into a hypocrisy. The thing about it is, we, the people, are in power towards electing or rejecting this type of atmosphere into our reality, into our presence. And until the people stand up against this type of charade, it's probably going to continue on the same level that it's continuing on, towards it being just a big show.
To beat out the primetime shows.
You know, I mean, I saw a poll just...
The primetime shows. The primetime shows. That who's paying for? Once more, we are.
I think just yesterday with
we are.
Network 51% saying the president should be removed.
For the next week or so, however long this lasts, this will dominate the days of our lives, the edge of life, as the world turns. This will dominate all other primetime day shows at the expense of the American people.
Moved. My point being, because we haven't even had the trial yet, but my point being that the cake is so baked when it comes to what people think about Donald Trump, and I think we do have to expect people to, catch whipped cream in their mouth and watch impeachment at the same time. In prime time, which actually is, I'd say to Mitch McConnell, be careful what you wish for. You wanted the trial to be in prime time. You got more viewers.
Let me bring in Maya on that point, which is both things can be true.
So see, now all of a sudden the media is turning this into a viewing entity. Now let's see if MSNBC can get more viewers than CNN. Now let's see if CNN can get more viewers than Fox or ABC or CBS. Now it's turned into a viewing competition. And that's not what the politics of the American government is supposed to be about. It's kind of like suing somebody. You don't sue somebody for money simply because you want money. You're suing them to prove that what that they have done was inadequate, it was wrong, and you're trying to let them know that what they done was wrong by suing them. It's kind of like suing them over a wrongful death. If the truth be known, yeah, you may get $1 million. You may get $2 million out of a wrongful death suit. Kind of like the airplane that just got knocked out of the sky by the Iranians. There'll be lawsuits coming from the Canadians towards suing the Iranian government. And I'm sure because they got the bucks, coming up with $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, maybe a $3 million lawsuit per person won't be nothing uncommon. But in reality, can you really pay back a human being's life of what that life could have been an asset to the rest of the world, to the rest of society? That very human being that you said was only valued at $2 million may have created the cure for cancer. Can you put a price tag on somebody that was smart enough to identify the right gene of coming up with a cure for cancer? $2 million won't even be a drop in the bucket towards what that person's ideals or what that person's work is worth, inevitably. And I'm hypothetically speaking. I'm not saying that in all cases somebody's death is going to, that you can compare apples to oranges this way. But I'm just, using that as a metaphor that a $2 million settlement on a person's death not all the time covers the expense of what the value of that person could actually have been valued at in the eyes of society. It may have been an unmeasurable, innumerable amount of money that person may have been worth because of the value, content of whatever he or she was involved in pertaining to bettering society versus worsening it.
Chris is talking about when you get a story this big, you're asking a lot of people who haven't been following, people who literally say, Gordon Sondland, who's that? Why should I care? Ken Starr, that's a name I know, and you're asking them to catch up with the storyline. We are in season 3 or season 4, and you're saying, do you understand this episode of House of Cards? And you'd be forgiven for not. Right. Speak to that point, combined with what we just saw from these House managers, which is the argument that Mitch McConnell, I'm going to play this sound for you, Mitch McConnell, you can't even believe Mitch McConnell from 2 weeks ago, let alone what he's doing today on the Senate floor. Briefly, here was Mitch McConnell pledging to follow the Clinton rules.
And all we're doing here is saying we're going to get started in exactly the same way that 100 senators agreed to 20 years ago. What's good for President Clinton is good for President Trump. Fair is fair. There will be no unfair new rule book written solely for President Trump.
I have to start by admitting that I care a lot about Meghan, Harry, and Archie. So on that one, I have to agree with Chuck. I do think that both these things are true. And going specifically to the soundbite of Mitch McConnell saying, we're doing this like Clinton, it's all fair. If you add in Ken Starr's name, for some people that'd be like, oh yes, it'll remind us of Clinton and kind of reinforce that point. I think, though, that one of the things we need to recognize is the soundbite clip moments of news coverage is going to exist, and one of the bigger issues is Fox News is not going to be carrying the same clips as other news. And when we had the Nixon impeachment process, right, because we didn't get to a trial in Nixon, the reality was there was much more shared information across the American public about what was happening. And I think an important part of this isn't just whether people are tuning into details, because I think there is a lot of formed opinion. I do think new information changes and can impact informed opinion if people get the information. And one of the things that's going to happen here, and why I think the witnesses and evidence are such a big fight, is because it's exactly that effort to utilize the fact that we have a divided fact machine where we don't all get the same facts, and where we can, and where Mitch McConnell understands how to use his theater to try to play that.
Let me tell viewers exactly where we are at. We just watched the House managers present. Senator Chuck Schumer has newly announced just moments ago he's going to speak at 11 a.m. That is the new box in the corner of your screen. Chuck Schumer has been tussling with Mitch McConnell. We have a lot more and some special guests, plus our all-star panel stays. We're going to fit in a quick break. You're watching MSNBC on day one of Trump on Trial. Primarily Congressman Schiff and Nadler making their case for what they see as a cover-up embedded in the new draft rules from Senator Mitch McConnell. We expect to hear from Senator Schumer as well. He's already put out statements. We know where he stands, but we're really getting into the actual wrangling as the senators step to the floor around noon and the trial procedure returns at 1 p.m. We will bring that to you live here on MSNBC. Now we turn to a new guest, former Republican congressman from Florida, Bill McCollum, a House manager from the Senate trial of Bill Clinton. Thanks for joining me, sir.
Happy to be with you, Ari. Thank you.
Thank you. When you look at these House managers, putting aside, if we may, some of the details of the case and the potential politics, what do you think of the way the House managers in this round have proceeded thus far?
Well, I think that it's somewhat the pot calling the kettle black. As I listened to Congressman Schiff cry, this is unfair, and we need to have new witnesses, we need to have new evidence, we need to do discovery. He didn't do his job, if you will, in my opinion, in the House. They were not fair to the Republicans, didn't allow them to have a single witness as they called into these committee hearings, and then they chose not to subpoena these records, not to go forward in the court and try to get the witness like John Bolton with the objection from the president of executive privilege. If he'd gone forward in the courts and challenged that, he might well have gotten John Bolton. Now we're in a Senate trial where it's a very different matter. And I would beg to differ from what I'm listening to them argue, that in fact the Senate rules that are there right at the moment are pretty much like the Clinton rules. The differences are very small. In this case, they're going to present their case. They're going to have a lot of time to do it. I don't know about the argument about how much, but we certainly didn't use up nearly as much time as being given in this case, and I doubt they will either in presenting it. And then at that point in time, there's going to ultimately be a motion to dismiss. And the fundamental question that some were spinning around on this is, what is the issue underlying all of it? Is there a crime? That's one question, but we did have crimes in the Clinton impeachment trial, but that's not a prerequisite for impeaching the president. You can have abuse of power, but their case is fairly weak because they didn't do all their homework right, in my opinion. And secondly, because ultimately, I think many senators are going to conclude, I think the majority, that there was no high crime and misdemeanor, even if you took everything they've said, everything the House managers said, and say, okay, let's say it's true. Mm-hmm. We still don't think that it's impeachable. We aren't going to remove the president for that. So we're now down to politics.
Well,
most of this is a
I got to jump in because you've been so thorough. You've hit a couple points, and we only have a little time at the end of the hour. Some of what you said is your analysis, which we've called upon you for. Some of what you said makes assertions. I should mention there were witnesses on behalf of the administration in the House investigative process. There were expert witnesses. People remember, like Jonathan Turley, who made the president's case, and there were the president's employees, like Gordon Sondland, who remains the president's employee, and there were other witnesses who, as you mentioned, declined to participate. So I just want viewers to have those facts. I guess the other question I have for you, though, when you look at where we're headed, is do you think it is a good idea for the process for the Senator McConnell to change these rules in a way where there could be only one vote on whether to hear witnesses in theory, and if that vote is rejected, the American people won't even know where the senators stand on individual witnesses, which would appear to be a change from the rules that your side operated under last time?
Well, first of all, there will be a motion to dismiss after the arguments are made, after the senators get to ask their questions. If that motion to dismiss passes, just as it would have been the case if Senator Byrd's motion to dismiss the Clinton impeachment had passed, it did not, then of course there won't be any witnesses. There'll be a conclusion that there's not anything there sufficient to rise to a high crime and misdemeanor, even if you have the witnesses to prove the arguments that are being made underneath all this. My view, Ari, has always been that if that motion goes down, then there should be witnesses, and there will be a separate vote at that point on that question. I would imagine that if in fact the motion goes down to dismiss, that there will be the votes there to call witnesses, and then they'll have to decide which ones.
Full disclosure, as we say, we have 40 seconds left. Are you saying, though, that you think it would be good for fact-finding to have witnesses in this Senate trial?
I am if the motion to dismiss goes down, but a very set, limited number of those witnesses. They should be equally divided. I don't know about how many new witnesses. I don't know if they ought to be witnesses that have never appeared before in the House, because would be a discovery process. There are all those kind of things the senators have to decide.
Senator McCollum, as they say, you have been in the game and on the field, and we appreciate getting your expertise, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Orlando, Florida. Mickey Mouse.
Thank you very much.
over how the case will proceed, already heating up on Capitol Hill. The Senate's top Republican, Mitch McConnell, has unveiled the ground rules, which Democrats are now calling a national disgrace, accusing the majority leader of staging a cover-up.
Is this about hiding the evidence from the American people with late night sessions? Is this about just trying to get it over with?
Do the Republican senators want to be complicit in the cover-up of the president?
Sounds to me like they do.
We are going to hear from the Senate top Democrat Chuck Schumer as he begins speaking. Let's take that event.
Lawsuit against our health care law. It's a sharp reminder to the American people that while all this important business is going on, the president and the Republican Party is trying to take away Americans' health care. Woe is us if they succeed, either this year or next year. Now, let's get to the issue at hand. As you all know, President Trump is accused of
What did I say a while ago? It's a diversion. It is a diversion. Somebody is doing things in behind the closed doors that the American people aren't aware of. And if you don't watch, they're going to pass something that's going to be devastating to the American people's lives.
Forcing a foreign leader into interfering in our elections to benefit himself, and then doing everything in his power to cover it up. If proved, the president's actions are crimes against democracy itself. It cannot be overstated how serious this charge is. If Americans start believing that foreigners can affect and elect presidents or senators or governors, if foreigners can interfere in elections and determine the outcome instead of the American people determining the outcome, our democracy is vastly eroded. People will start losing faith in elections and the very wellspring and foundation of this grand and great nation that the founding fathers established more than 200 years ago. So, the charges, these are the charges we're being asked to try. For anyone who says, oh, this isn't serious or this is done all the time, no way. This president, in his abuse of power, is unfortunately unique and willing to abuse his power with fewer conscious qualms and far more readily and easily than any president we have seen, and by a long shot. And the only power that the American people have when a president abuses power, other than elections, is this impeachment process. We take it very seriously.
And should.
Very seriously.
And should.
So, one Senator Inhofe is sworn in this afternoon. The ceremonial functions at the beginning of the presidential impeachment trial will be complete. The Senate must then determine the rules of the trial. The Republican leader will offer an organizing resolution that outlines his plan for the rules of the trial, which was only released last night. Amazingly, waited till the very end, and now we see why. It is completely partisan. It was kept secret until the eve of the trial.
Bias.
And now that it's finally been made public, it's obvious to see why Leader McConnell was keeping it so close to his vest.
Right.
Because the McConnell rules seem to be designed by President Trump for President Trump. Simply executed by Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans. It appears that Leader McConnell decided to go along with the president's desire to cover up his wrongdoing. Hook, line, and sinker. It almost seems that the resolution was written in the White House, not in the Senate. The McConnell resolution is a blueprint for an impeachment trial on fast forward. It asks the Senate to sprint through the trial as fast as possible and makes getting evidence